It reminds me of softened butter. That's the imagery that comes to my mind when I think of the finish of this foundation.
So I've been trying the Tom Ford Traceless Soft Matte Foundation for the last 2 weeks, and I have some thoughts. Let's get into it. So first things first, let's do the demo and I can show you what this foundation looks like. So I picked up 3 shades, shade 6 Natural, 6.5 Sable, and 7.2 Sepia. 7.2 is definitely too dark for me. A shade that I would say would be my summer shade, not a winter shade that I'm in at the moment. Then we have 6 and 6.5, and I'll put a footage here for you to look at. Shade 6, unfortunately, a little bit too light, just a teeny tiny bit too light. So whenever I use shade 6, I just feel very unhappy about the shade, even though I can make it work. Now 6.5 is the shade that is a little bit too dark for me. So that's what I'm gonna be using today. A better undertone. It doesn't have any olive undertones, unfortunately, but it does have those warm golden undertones. And this is a shade that I prefer over shade 6. So I'm going to just apply that all over my face. And the thing with this Tom Ford foundation that I found is that you can build up coverage very quickly. This is not a very lightweight foundation. So often high-end foundations tends to be super lightweight. This is not one of those. You can definitely build up coverage with this. So you want to be careful how much you're applying, because if you apply too much, you might be really surprised at how full coverage this goes. So I'm trying to practice restraint while applying this. Now, as you can see with the shade, it's not a bad color match. It's just a little bit too warm and too golden for my skin. My skin, it definitely leans more olive, yellow olive. So it's not the right shade, but we can make it work. The other thing with this foundation is, and this is really important, you really have to make sure that you prep your skin without using too many hydrating, too many emollient products. Otherwise, this foundation over the course of the day will start to look a little bit cakey. So it's funny because in my previous foundation videos I've done, I mentioned that you have to have a really hydrated base to work with, whereas for this foundation it's the exact opposite. You don't want to have too many skincare products underneath, otherwise it will start to look cakey. So for example, for my skin prep today, all I have are 2 lightweight serums and then a sunscreen, a moisturizing sunscreen. That's all I've got on my skin today. And this foundation is just going to apply really well on top of that. If I had gone in with toner and essence and serums and moisturizer and sunscreen, then I'll be in trouble because it will start to look cakey on me. So just a very important note when it comes to this foundation. The other one is application. Now you would have seen just from here how beautifully it applied to the skin. The first time I used this foundation, I was really amazed by the texture. It is so beautiful. It just melts into the skin. And the minute I used it, I was like, wow, I'm impressed. So the texture is definitely something to be coveted for. It's a beautiful texture for this foundation. The other thing is, this foundation is best applied with a damp beauty blender. You can absolutely use a brush with this. However, I just find that the brush doesn't really help the product sink into the skin as well as a damp beauty blender. Most of the foundations that I use a brush because the brush does an excellent job of spreading that foundation. However, for this specific Tom Ford foundation, I think you're really going to get an amazing look to the skin if you just use a blender instead. So that's another tip with this foundation. Also, I have a dry patch here, but because I've used a beauty blender, this foundation has not clung to my dry patch, which is amazing. Normally, if I did use a foundation brush with this foundation, it would cling to dry patches. Not a lot, but it would definitely cling. However, with the damp beauty blender, there's no clinging, which is amazing. Now here in fact the foundation looks really amazing. I think it looks very skin-like, and that's because I didn't use too much and I also used a beauty blender. just in my concealer. And for my eye look today, I'm going to use this gorgeous palette from Urban Decay. This palette just always makes me really happy every time I look at it. And that's just from the color selection to color placement, the quality, everything from this palette is amazing. So I'm just going to be using these two shades here, and I might smoke it out with a little bit of this shade. So just taking this shade right here. I'm just going to take this dark brown shade and use that to buff out the outer edge. Add that to the outer edge. And then I'm just going to diffuse that. Now I'm just going to take this beautiful shade right here and add that to the middle of my lid. Look how gorgeous is that. Very much a neutral to cool tone bronzy gold. I am back with the finished look. I have kept it very simple, very neutral today. So this is what the foundation looks like. It's coming in close. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but it hasn't really clung to my dry patch there, and overall it's looking really good. I do agree with the claim for soft matte. It is definitely a natural matte finish. It's not super dewy, it's not super matte. Looking at the ingredient list, I also really like that it has some skincare ingredients, which, let's be honest, it should, considering the price tag for this foundation. You know, if it didn't have skincare ingredients, I would be very worried. But the fact that it has some plant extracts and some pretty decent skincare ingredients, nothing out of the ordinary that I could see, but I did see some very interesting plant extracts, so that is good. It also didn't have any denatured alcohol, which is perfect. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by my eye look. I really love this palette, and this is such a beautiful eye look. Ugh. Anyways, what was I saying? It does have fragrance. It has lavender oil, which I don't mind. I like the scent of lavender, so it doesn't bother me. It's also not very offensive, so when I use this foundation, I'm not bombarded with this scent, so it's nothing like that, which is great. So I will be doing a wear test today to show you how this foundation wears over the course of the day. So let me just summarize. This foundation is beautiful if you know how to use it. I wouldn't really recommend it if you're someone who loves using your skincare products and use a lot of them in the morning, and then you layer this on top. It's going to look cakey throughout the day, so definitely not the way to go. You want to keep your skincare pretty simple. Best application is also with a damp beauty blender. It gets the most natural finish from this foundation. If you were to use a brush, you'll end up getting a little bit more coverage, and it just doesn't melt into the skin as easily. The texture of this foundation is beautiful. It's very buttery smooth. When you apply it to your face, you can straight away feel how buttery it is. I feel like there are times when my skin just looks like softened butter. Yeah, softened butter. That's how my skin looks sometimes when I wear this, especially if I've got my base right. And if you've got your base right, it can look super beautiful. And I really enjoy the really soft matte finish from this foundation. It looks really natural. It looks skin-like. It is smoothing, but it's not too smoothing. So for example, my recent foundation review was for Huda Beauty Luminous Matte Foundation. There is a big difference between that foundation and this foundation, not only in terms of coverage, but in terms of application, in terms of the finish that you get. This foundation is very easy to blend, unlike the Huda Beauty. However, Huda Beauty had the most amazing smoothing finish. So that's something that is still in my mind, because even though you had to take your time to blend that foundation in and you had to put that effort in from the beginning, the end result is that you have this very flawless base that looks super smooth. That is not the case with the Tom Ford. The Tom Ford looks far more natural, far more skin-like, and not as smooth as the Huda Beauty. So that in itself can be a pro or a con depending on where you sit and what type of foundation you're looking for.
Hey guys, so I'm back and it's been 10 hours. I have managed to stick it out for 10 hours and this is how the foundation looks after 10 hours. It looks actually pretty good. So let me quickly blot my face. I actually haven't even blotted my face in these 10 hours. So the foundation has lasted really well on me. I'm just going to blot the areas that I get shiny. This is what the foundation looks like. It has settled a little bit around my laugh line, so just a teeny tiny bit, nothing major, but it hasn't come off. It is still intact. I actually really enjoy the finish of this foundation. I think that I wouldn't call it a matte foundation. It's definitely more on the natural side. I would even go far as to say it's even slightly dewy. It's really not matte, and perhaps on dry skin tones it will look matte, but if you're normal to oily skin tones, it's really not going to look matte on you. It doesn't really look matte on me. It definitely looks more on the natural to slightly dewy side. It reminds me of softened butter. That's the imagery that comes to my mind when I think of the finish of this foundation. I actually really like it. I think it's beautiful. I also like the formula in this foundation. You know, it doesn't have denatured alcohol, which is fantastic. Also, you can see from my face, it hasn't oxidized either. So I was expecting that there might be some oxidization, but my foundation actually looks really similar to how it looked upon first application. I've enjoyed wearing it for the last 2 weeks. So I'm gonna say that if I manage to find this foundation on a sale, then I will pick it up. Now, if you guys have tried this foundation, let me know your thoughts below. What did you think of it? Or if you're thinking of purchasing this, what are your thoughts? By the way, if you have a foundation request, leave it in the description box below, because I've been creating a list of foundations that you guys have been asking for. This was one of them and I'm very happy I tried it. I've been meaning to try this foundation since last year when it came out, and it's a beautiful foundation. Just know that there are specific ways to use it. Beauty blender is the way to go, and of course don't use too many hydrating skincare products underneath. It looks beautiful, like softened butter. I'll catch you guys in my next video. See ya.